Talking to yourself when you live alone is a really weird experience, but we're gonna go with it. Hi, my name's Claire. This is my first ever video about books and what I think of them. And as this first video, I chose a topic that is, I hope it's philosophically making sense, because today I'm gonna tell you about 3 books I recently read about aging and getting old and death. It has come to me that to pick this topic as the first book talk video says a lot about how much faith I have in myself and this channel, but we'll get on with it. So the 3 books are Somewhere Towards the End by Diana Athill, and Older, A Thought Diary by James Rose Evans, and one of my favorite authors of all time, No Time to Spare by Ursula Le Guin. I didn't buy these 3 books all together at the same time. I picked them in different times. I have a little habit that every time I walk past a local bookstore, I will go inside and buy 1 book in the hope that me purchasing there would keep them live longer for even just a few minutes. Let's start with Somewhere Towards the End. This is a book I enjoy tremendously. I bought extra copies for some of my friends because I think every woman should have read it. The introduction page reads, "In Somewhere Towards the End, Athill, who has made her reputation for the honesty and elegantly expressed wisdom of her memoirs, presents a lively narrative of events, lovers, and friendships, the people and experiences that have taught her to regret very little, to resist despondency." So this author, Diana Athill, she was one of the best editor of 20th century. She was an editor for decades, and she wrote, because she passed away in 2019 when she was 101. This book was written when she was 71, and she only after she retired at the age of 76, she started to write her own fiction work. The biggest impression I have on this book is it's very warm. It's something I have never expected to gain from reading this book, because in the book she recalled her life, her significant others, her friends, her life, and of course she talked a lot about the physical pain of getting old, the inconvenience, and what life had been if you were a single woman who has no husband and no children. She has never been married, and she didn't have any kids. I read this book when I was 28 or 29, during a time I had serious questions and doubts about women and her choices, because I'm 30 this year. In about less than 2 months I'll be 31, and for now I don't have anyone. It's just me. I live by myself. I live in a city that's away from my parents. I have a job. I have a fish. I don't have a boyfriend or a husband, and I have reached to the point that I started to think having kids is not a bad idea, but still I'm not sure if I wanted to have it. So I read this book. I opened this book with a huge question mark in my head. What's life with doing something you love but without your partner, your children, your a loved one, romantically? What's the life like that would be? And I've gained some answers, or not answers, like impressions from this book. To start with, this is a very funny book, like not funny weird, funny haha, funny, warm. It makes you chuckle, it makes you smile, because she was a very funny lady. She was the type of lady that if you meet in London and you met her in a cashier in the supermarket, and the machine bugged, and she would turn around to you and said something, just 1 or 2 sentences that make you laugh. Like, I don't know, but she gave me that impression. And she had she's very straightforward. She's very honest about her life. And oh yes, I didn't have a husband, I didn't have a boyfriend. Yes, I had been the other woman in someone else's marriage, but no one ever found out, and I apologized to that extent, but I don't apologize for, blah blah blah. She made her case, and she made you believe. Her writing in one of the paragraphs she wrote during those years when she was romantically active. If a man wanted to marry me, as 3 of them did, I felt what Groucho Marx felt about a club willing to accept him, disdain. And what touched me the most was not her work or her love life. Sometimes I felt like when you were reading a memoir and you were peeking on others' privacy, it was great, but what moved me the most was about the small details in her storytelling, that how she loved to get a puppy. Actually, both Adhill and Le Guin wrote about being old and having a pet when you were old, and they have some similarity. We'll get to that. Adhill wrote about how she loved having dogs, she loved puppies, but it gets harder because you're getting older, your body changed, you can't walk them so much or took care of them like you used to. And she also wrote about how, being old means eventually we'll be taken care of by others, and a lot of people are extremely scared of that, losing control of your body, losing the dignified normal life. And she wrote about death, but in a very cautiously peaceful way. She had this attitude that we're like trees, and the leaves became yellow and we all fell to the ground and we all started again. It's part of the circle of life. And I think what moved me the most is she saw all this coming: death, being heartbroken, having a job, but when you get old you eventually have to retire, all the things you missed, the choice you didn't make in life. By the time she wrote this book, she saw all of that coming inevitably, and she was telling you with her own experience that it's okay. We just have one life, and whatever choices you made, some you might regret, some you might not, we will all be dead. But that was okay, because that was a part of life. And as the writer of this book, she already accepted it, and she didn't say, so should you as a reader, but she made an example. She showed you that, oh, you know what, yeah, that's it, but we're okay with it. And that's why I loved it. And also the Chinese version was quite small, so I have small hands and I can hold it. It was not a big break. You can read it in the metro, when you were waiting for something. And of course it was not leisure reading. I won't say it's as someone who thought about death and getting old, especially die alone. By the way, she didn't die alone, because she eventually died, I think, peacefully in a hospital. Yes, in a hospital, and in a peacefully fulfilling way. Not fulfilling, like content way. What was I saying? She comforted me. That's something I didn't expect from reading the book, because somewhere towards the end, first the title felt very sad, because I never thought about it when I was in 20-something. When you were 20-something, life was a big party. But you started to think that, oh, where's the end for me? Is it too early to start thinking about the end? Am I mentally prepared to die alone? Or what was the life like when you were really, really old and you can't drive? And by the way, both these two female writers wrote about the biggest inconvenience of getting old is that when you can't drive a car and you wanted to go somewhere. Those were the details that you could have never imagined as a young-ish reader. But in general, I really, really enjoyed reading this book. The second book, Older, A Thought Diary by James Rose Evans. It's okay. First, before we talk about this, before I started reading this book, I was watching a TV show on Hulu, Boston Legal. For any of you that was not a legal drama fan or have never watched the crazy Danny Crane and Ellen Shore.
What are you doing in my bed? I don't know!
Boston Legal was about a law firm in, of course, Boston. And the two main characters, Ellen Shore is the younger one, and Danny Crane is the older one. They're both slutty. They're both funny, slutty, and very good at their jobs. Danny has Alzheimer's, and he was 70-something in the 4th season. I'm currently on season 4. And one day he insisted on taking a case. It was first-degree murder trial, so it was a big issue. And Alan, his best friend, was afraid that he might not be prepared for such a big trial because he was old and he snapped and he went crazy all the time. And Danny looked at him and said, my time hasn't, I want my day. I've seen you in the past 4 years having your day in court. Now I want my day. And Alan told him, you had your day in the past, in the history. And Danny said, no, I still want my day. Now, right now. But at that time it was kind of sad because, again, maybe it's the nostalgia, melodrama, like the melodrama part of me, but the show focused a lot about the elderly. He said, okay, no, not the elderly, like the older people. How they felt that their life is flying out of time, but they still think they're young, and they still think they can do it, and they still want to live their best life. When you see, Danny was a great lawyer, but even Danny Crane, the unbeatable, the best lawyer ever in the history of Boston, even Danny Crane had a day of getting old. It's kind of sad, but so the reason I brought this up was in this book, Older, A Thought Diary. This is a year of diary written when James was 90 years old. So he started it by saying that, oh, this is my 90th birthday, and I think that I should have wrote something. And first of all, it's very, very detailed documentary. If you wanted to know what getting old feels like, you read this book. How his life changed because of the pain in his ear and the small things that he still enjoyed doing in the kitchen, or he wanted to cancel all the dinner with friends because he was really tired and it has pain everywhere. And the reason I brought up Boston Legal was James had a roommate that lives with him, his roommate, and it was just a younger guy that lived in the other room of his apartment. They were friends, like there's nothing, I don't think there is anything romantically involved. Everything was platonic. And he was just a very good, great friend who was decades younger than James and lived in his house. Just like Danny and Alan in Boston Legal at the end of I know how the show ended. Again, they're not romantically involved, at least that's what I believe. But the show and the book got me thinking that when it comes to getting old, it's not just one day you're like me and still in a relatively young stage, and the next day you became 70, 80, 90 and you can't move. It's not that. It's getting old happened slowly, step by step. Watching the show and reading this book made me realize that you know what, maybe I should be more peaceful, calm about life, because again, we are inevitably going to die, but it is what we cherished the most that matters when the day comes. And getting old doesn't mean sitting at home alone watching television all day and no one to talk to, which was actually like one of the things I scared the most about getting old. Getting old, you need to be able to make fun of yourself, not to make you feel worse or make anyone else feel worse, but to make life easier, because life would be so hard for everybody and we just have to laugh at it. And again, this is not a very easy to read book, but it hit different, this book, than the other two, because first of all, James is a guy and you can sort of tell there are differences when it comes to men and women getting old. Yeah, there definitely is. Also because James, I think he was seeing a therapist for a long time. He studied Freud and Jung, and it reflected in his writing. I think psychology helped him make peace with life, make peace with himself, and make peace with all the physical and mental pain that he had to endure at the age of 90. And it was moving and hilarious, of course, and sad, naturally, when you talk about losing loved ones. I think if you are expecting candies and Barbies, you shouldn't read this book. And this one's a bit thicker, and I read it before bed, so I don't want to carry it in the metro. And the last one, I left this. I think I should have introduced this book after somewhere towards the end, but I left it to last for a reason. No Time to Spare is an essay collection by Ursula Le Guin. She said she was influenced by another writer, and she started her own blog at the year of 2010. She wrote a lot about getting old in the first few portions of the book. She wrote about how, again, like Diana Athill, she wrote about how she cannot drive a car anymore because her body hurts, or it's not safe for her to drive anymore. And her husband can't drive anymore because of body pain as well, and that became a very big inconvenience of their life, because you have to plan your dinner now, because you can't just go to the grocery anytime you want now. And she wrote about how she handled fan mail, because she was very famous when she wrote this book. And she talked about getting new kittens, adopting new cats as a way of hope and keeping her day, interesting, and how her cats was flying in her house. And I especially like, because Ursula Le Guin is a science fiction writer, and she has this Apple machine in her study to back up her files, the time machine. And her cat likes to sleep in front of the machine to hear the beeping sound. And one day she was backing up the files, and she blinked, and the cat vanished. And she was calling his name, walking, like searching for him. And after a while, the cat came back from somewhere near the time machine. And she wrote in the book that, at that point I thought the cat, Pat, his name was, Pat was sucked into a hole in the time, and he became a time traveler, which I think was a very Ursula thing to wrote, because the fantasy parts of her, you can see it's still very greatly functional. But that's not the whole reason I wanted to talk about this book. And I wanted to end this video with this book, because other than what her life was, getting old, and her life and her pet, she wrote a lot about issues that she believed should be voiced. And we're not talking politics here, because that's a topic for another time. She wrote about her issues in environment, politics, feminism, and she was very sharp, as always. Well, with Ursula Le Guin, when hasn't she been? But if somewhere towards the end, and Older, a Diary was kind of gloomy and sad, and well, it's the inevitable thing will happen for everybody. But Ursula wrote this book in a very optimistic way. She believed that for herself, as long as she can voice her opinions about a lot of things, that her life, that so many people's life, that her country's life is still hopeful. I think we're all afraid of death, me particularly. One of my biggest nightmares is dying alone without anyone I loved, and just go to the other side. But Ursula Le Guin's book gave me a lot to think about, because other than dying or aging, wherever your age is, there are still a lot of things to care about, a lot of things to pay attention to, a lot of things to fight for in this whole world. I didn't, maybe I underestimated her, because when I purchased this book, I really thought it was a sad essays about her life. Maybe a funny one, yes, but I didn't thought she would wrote so much in her blog about her life, her thinking, something beyond writing fictions. And we all know that Ursula I think she speaks French and Chinese, because she translated the 道德经, is it? I'm not sure, and if I was wrong, I apologize. But you can see how her journey in the sea of knowledge, of philosophy, of language, of science, of literature, broadened her whole world. even when she was old, too old to drive, or too old to walk into a park and spend a whole day outside, her mind was still incredibly sharp, and she still cares deeply about the world, and she believed she could make a difference by voicing those things that she thought was important enough. And I think that was I like to use this book as the end of this video, because maybe instead of scared of death, we should be more scared that we didn't do anything while we were alive. And there ends our first ever booktube. What do you call them? I hope you like it. I hope you like seeing me and chatting with me. And until next time.